A ruined suit at a front door is where this account begins for me. Not with a tunnel, not with a field of light, with a 35-year-old person trying to get home after dinner while the body is quietly running out of blood. I'm glad you're here, because the distance between that floor and what follows is enormous, and yet the smallest details carry more weight than the grand ones. There is one ordinary object I want you to keep in mind: a discarded gum wrapper. When it appears, I'm going to stop there because this account gives that scrap of plastic a reach I have never heard described quite this way. Before we begin, let me ask you something simple. Has a tiny choice ever returned to you years later and felt much larger than it did when you made it? It was August 5th, just 13 days ago. At 35 years old, I was at the peak of my career as a creative corporate strategy and media consultant. We had just finished leading intensive remote strategy sessions and wrapped a major collaborative project, celebrating the launch as well as my birthday. That night, I became very ill. I started having intense stomach cramps and severe internal bleeding. I had been diagnosed with what doctors thought was a severe ulcer a few months earlier, but due to constant deadlines, video meetings, and travel, I had neglected taking the medications. I excused myself from the team dinner, packed up my laptop, and drove home. When I got to my front door, I collapsed. I was bleeding profusely onto the floor and ruined my suit. It turned out my intestinal tract had ruptured. They later diagnosed me with acute ulcerative colitis. I managed to reach my phone and call a friend who rushed over and helped me into her car, driving as fast as possible to the emergency room. When we arrived, the hospital was overwhelmed with trauma cases, and the intake area was in total disarray. Because of the sheer amount of blood I had lost, I was pale, shivering, and barely coherent. The admitting staff misjudged my condition, assuming I was dealing with a substance overdose or an infectious crisis, and delayed checking me in properly. I was wheeled off to an overflow corridor and left unattended in a back corner. I lay there on a cold gurney, feeling the warmth draining from my extremities. I don't know how long I was fading out there, maybe 25 minutes before my vitals crashed and my heart rhythm began to fail. Just as darkness started closing in around my eyes, a dedicated emergency nurse walked past, noticed my gray skin and shallow breathing, and checked my wrist. The moment she realized my pulse was virtually gone, she sounded the alarm, shouted for an emergency team, and personally pushed my gurney straight into the operating room. By the time I was transferred onto the operating table, I was in critical condition and clinically flatlining. I had lost so much blood over the preceding weeks and hours that my circulatory system was collapsing. The medical staff frantically tried to insert intravenous lines into my arms, but the veins kept blowing out under the pressure. I could hear the monitors beeping faster and faster, and then blending into a steady, unbroken tone. As my physical eyes closed, my perception suddenly opened in a way I'd never experienced. While lying on the operating table, I saw an enormous rotating tunnel appear right in front of me. It looked like a concentric target, a spinning bullseye made of pure, living vibration. Bands of sapphire violet and shimmering silver were turning within one another, pulling my awareness forward. I didn't feel fear or confusion. The sight felt infinitely more real, solid, and natural than the physical world I had just left behind. I watched the surgical team moving around my body in slow motion. They rolled me onto my side to attempt a central line in my lower back, but before the needle even touched my skin, there was a distinct audible snap in my consciousness. The physical operating room disappeared into a singular sharp beam of pure blackness. I keep returning to the nurse, placing 2 fingers on a nearly absent pulse. Before any tunnel opens, before anything that might be called spiritual enters the account, one person notices what a crowded room has missed. That matters to me. The staff had already placed a story over this patient: overdose, infection, something that could wait in a corridor. Then the color of the skin and the shallowness of a breath broke through that assumption. You can hear how narrow the margin was. A human being was almost lost inside somebody else's quick explanation. The strange part begins only after a very ordinary act of attention saves the last possible second. Immediately following that snap, I found myself floating near the ceiling, looking down at the entire room from above. I was completely outside of my physical form. I saw my pale body lying motionless on the surgical table. I watched the lead surgeon performing chest compressions, the anesthesiologist adjusting the oxygen mask, and the nurses hurriedly setting up a defibrillator. I could hear every word they said, understand their exact thoughts and stress levels, and feel their emotional state, yet I felt no pain, panic, or distress whatsoever. I felt lighter than air, completely whole, and at peace. Then, a warm, magnetic pulling sensation centered around my solar plexus drew my awareness upward and away from the hospital room. I was gently vacuumed into the spinning tunnel. As I moved through it, the speed increased, but there was no wind, friction, or vertigo. The walls of the tunnel were alive with gentle waves of light and soft harmonic resonance. Standing along the luminous pathway, familiar figures appeared to welcome me. I saw friends, extended family members, and mentors who had passed away years before. Among them stood my third-grade teacher, Mrs. Bellamy. But she was not the frail, elderly woman I remembered from my school days. She was radiant, young, vibrant, and overflowing with joyful vitality. We did not speak using vocal cords. Instead, thoughts, feelings, and deep memories were exchanged instantly from mind to mind, complete with pure affection and understanding. As I traveled deeper through the spiraling passage, the visual atmosphere transformed into streams of universal principles and living geometry. Geometric shapes, fractal patterns, and glowing mathematical equations swept across my field of vision. Sequences of prime numbers, multidimensional grids, and fundamental formulas of quantum physics. I saw the equations that govern the curvature of space, the flow of time, and the gravitational pull between planets. Before this event, I was purely a creative thinker, drawn to visual arts, aesthetic design, and media strategy, never possessing an affinity for advanced mathematics. Yet in that corridor, my mind operated with total clarity and comprehension. I absorbed the foundational mechanics of the universe as effortlessly as breathing. I understood how matter condenses from pure light, how consciousness precedes physical form, and how the observer and the observed are tied together in a single continuous system. I had to slow down at the equations. A person who describes a life built around images, design, and strategy suddenly speaks of prime numbers, curved space, and gravity, as if the knowledge were being remembered rather than learned. I cannot verify what was understood there, and I will not pretend I can. But the form of the experience is unusual. Comfort does not arrive first as a face or a voice. It arrives as comprehension. For a mind that had trusted the visible world, the doorway is not belief, it is structure. That choice of imagery feels almost tailored, yet the narrator says mathematics was never familiar territory. I do not know whether that makes the account easier to explain or much harder. The luminous passage widened and opened into a vast expanse where an immense living tree stood before me. Its roots seemed to weave into the foundation of space itself, and its branches reached into infinite skies, glowing with emerald, gold, and crystalline light. I found myself resting comfortably within its boughs. Beside me appeared a radiant being, an elevated master of pure compassion and wisdom. Throughout my entire life, I had lived as a staunch atheist. I had always believed that human life was purely biological and that death was absolute oblivion. Standing in the presence of this being instantly dissolved every trace of my past skepticism. The guide emanated complete acceptance and unconditional warmth, without a single shred of judgment. Within the shelter of that living tree, my life review began. It was not a simple movie playing on a screen. It was a full spherical immersion where every moment of my life, from the second of my birth to the moment my heart stopped, unfolded all at once. I did not merely observe these events. I re-experienced them from my own perspective, from the perspective of everyone I interacted with, and from the neutral viewpoint of universal awareness. I was taken back to a sunny afternoon in high school. My sister and I were standing side by side in the hallway, opening our lockers right next to each other. It was my birthday, and she turned to me with a wide, affectionate smile, holding a small card. She said, "Aren't you going to tell me you love me and that you're glad I'm your sister? I'm your best friend." At that exact moment, members of the school athletic team walked by, laughing and watching us. Overcome by teenage pride, insecurity, and social vanity, I felt embarrassed. In the review, I felt my exact thoughts from that day. Just go away, my friends are watching. I refused to look her in the eyes, muttered something dismissive, turned my back, and walked away down the hall. That very evening, she was struck and killed by an impaired driver. I do not have a tidy sentence for a hallway memory that ends with a death the same evening. The pain here is not that the narrator failed to love a sister. The love was present. Pride simply kept it from crossing a few feet of school hallway when it mattered. That is a harsher idea than punishment, at least to me, not being condemned by some distant judge, but feeling the exact loneliness your silence placed inside someone you loved. The account says forgiveness was already there. Still, forgiveness does not erase the missing words. It only removes the place where a person might hide from them. That is an exacting kind of mercy. Reliving that moment tore through my soul, but as the sorrow washed over me, the loving presence beside me enveloped my consciousness in absolute grace. There was no condemnation, no punishment, and no anger coming from the light, only a pure, crystalline understanding of the truth. I was shown how my sister felt in that hallway, her quiet disappointment, her deep love for me, and her forgiveness. I saw clearly that whenever we withhold love, whenever we let vanity or coldness dictate our actions, we create a tear in the fabric of human connection that echoes forward. The review moved into another moment from my late 20s. I was driving across a river bridge on my way to present a corporate campaign pitch. I was brimming with arrogance, convinced of my own cleverness and importance. While waiting at a signal on the bridge, I unwrapped a piece of chewing gum, rolled the plastic wrapper into a small ball, and flicked it out of the car window into the water below. In the review, my awareness followed that tiny piece of plastic. I watched it hit the surface of the river, drift past city docks, and float through waterways lined with industrial processing plants. I watched it travel hundreds of miles into open coastal waters, where it settled into marine ecosystems and was ingested by sea life, contributing to the slow degradation of the water and the living creatures within it. Here is the gum wrapper. Nothing sacred looking, nothing anyone would save in a box. A bored movement of the hand sends it over a bridge, and the review refuses to let the action end when the wrapper leaves sight. That is the line of thought I wanted to pause over with you. Most of us measure a choice by the few seconds we can see. This account measures it by where the object keeps traveling after the chooser has forgotten it. I find that unsettling because it gives carelessness a long memory. The narrator is not shown a dramatic crime. The lesson is attached to something almost too small to confess, which may be precisely why it lands. I was shown the full chain of consequence. My single careless action was connected to the broader neglect of the planet. I saw that every small choice, whether dropping trash onto a street, speaking a harsh word to a cashier, or smiling at someone in despair, creates an unbroken ripple that touches thousands of lives across time. Every thought, word, and deed carries weight in the balance of existence. The life review did not stop at my mistakes. It also illuminated the quiet, forgotten moments where love had triumphed. I was shown a rainy afternoon when I was in my early 20s, walking through an underground train station. I had passed an elderly woman struggling to carry a heavy bundle up a steep flight of stairs. Without overthinking it or seeking any acknowledgement, I simply took the handles from her hands, carried the bags all the way to the street level, bowed, and walked away into the crowd. In the review, I felt what that simple gesture did inside her heart. She had been feeling completely invisible, exhausted by life, and on the verge of giving up after losing her husband. That 5-second interaction flooded her entire spirit with warmth and renewed her faith that someone in the world still cared. I experienced the exact relief that settled into her chest, and I saw how that uplifted mood carried through her entire week, inspiring her to call her daughter, reconcile an old estrangement, and pass that warmth forward. I realized then that the true measure of a life is never found in titles, bank balances, or professional status, but in how deeply and purely we allow love to move through us, to ease the burden of another soul. The wrapper goes down toward the river. The woman's bags go up toward the street. I cannot get past how neatly those two motions answer each other. One careless hand releases a burden into the world, another hand quietly takes a burden from someone. Neither moment looked important from the outside. No audience, no applause, no lasting memory for the person doing it. Yet the account gives both acts a life beyond their few seconds. I have heard many life reviews described in terms of kindness, but this one makes kindness almost physical, weight moved from one pair of hands to another. That is plainer than any grand rule and harder to talk around. When the life review concluded, the great tree around me gently dissolved into waves of soft, translucent color, and I entered a vast intermediate realm. In ancient traditions, this realm is called the transition space or cleansing station. It appeared as an expansive landscape of crystalline light, gentle flowing water, and soft pastel skies that held no harsh shadows. In this realm, I witnessed souls resting in tranquil pavilions of light, shedding the heavy emotional burdens, anxieties, and traumas they had carried during their physical lives on Earth. I saw streams of living water that did not merely wet the skin, but washed directly through the energetic essence of each person, removing every trace of sorrow, fear, and exhaustion. There was a feeling of profound renewal, like waking from a long, troubled dream into the crisp, refreshing air of a quiet morning. From that restorative space, my consciousness expanded even further, rising high above the earthly atmosphere, until I was floating in deep, velvety space, looking down at Earth and the surrounding cosmos. It was breathtaking beyond words. The planet was glowing with a vibrant living auric field, a radiant, breathing web of golden and turquoise light that wrapped around the entire globe. Every living thing on Earth was connected to this luminous grid. Every human, animal, tree, ocean, and mountain was an individual thread in a single, unified tapestry of life. From this cosmic viewpoint, I was shown both the immense beauty and the heavy struggles of our world. I saw the vast, deep oceans and felt the collective consciousness of marine life, pods of dolphins and great whales swimming through the depths, singing harmonic frequencies that help balance the energy of the planet. I also witnessed the heavy scars left by human greed, pollution, and systemic neglect. I saw areas where forests had been stripped bare and rivers poisoned by chemicals, and I felt the quiet, patient sorrow of the earth beneath those wounds. Yet alongside the darkness, I was shown the breathtaking brilliance of everyday goodness. I saw millions of tiny lights flickering across the continents. Whenever a teacher gently encouraged a struggling student, a spark of golden light flared upward. Whenever a paramedic knelt in the street to comfort an injured stranger, whenever a neighbor shared food with someone in need, or whenever a person chose patience instead of anger in a crowded office, a pulse of pure, luminous energy shot into the atmosphere, strengthening the entire web of life. I saw that the quiet kindness of ordinary people is what truly holds the world together and keeps darkness from overwhelming us. As I took in this immense panorama, the surrounding space began to shimmer with golden embers of living light. The particles danced and swirled together, creating an atmosphere of overwhelming warmth, brilliance, and presence. This was the source of all existence, the supreme intelligence and pure consciousness that people refer to as God. It was not an old man on a throne or a distant stern figure looking down with anger. It was an infinite ocean of pure, unconditional, intelligent love. The love radiating from this presence was so dense and profound that it defies all human speech. If you were to gather every single moment of love, safety, joy, and tenderness you have ever experienced in your physical life, the love for a family member, a partner, a loyal pet, or a lifelong friend, and multiply that feeling by millions of times, it still would not capture even a single drop of the immense peace that washed over me. Every doubt, insecurity, intellectual pride, and fear I had ever carried as an atheist melted away completely. I realized that my former skepticism had simply been a limited viewpoint, a small human defense against a reality that is far grander, warmer, and more loving than the intellect can measure. In the presence of the Source, there was only absolute acceptance, absolute understanding, and absolute belonging. We communicated not through language, but through direct knowing. The presence revealed to me the deeper architecture of reality. I saw how light slows down its vibration to become dense physical matter, and how every atom in our physical bodies is held together by conscious intention. I saw that time is not a straight, rigid line running from past to future. Rather, all moments exist simultaneously within an infinite landscape, like a traveler looking down at an entire countryside from the peak of a high mountain. Then the living light communicated a question directly into my heart. Do you want to return? Oddly, the largest question in the account arrives without a demand. Do you want to return? Leaves room for refusal. I noticed that because the narrator has just described an intelligence capable of showing planets, time, matter, and every hidden consequence of a life. With all of that power present, the choice is still handed back. No command, no threat, just a question placed directly into the heart. If this account is taken on its own terms, free will is not a small privilege granted inside the experience. It is the hinge on which the return turns. The body on the table is surrounded by urgency, but the decision beyond it is described as completely unforced. Before I could answer, a sequence of future pathways opened before my awareness. I was shown what lay ahead if I chose to re-enter my physical body. I saw the intensive physical rehabilitation I would have to endure, the hospital rooms, the slow recovery of my digestive health, the physical weakness, and the emotional challenges of reintegrating into normal life after having touched eternity. I saw that many of my former social circles and surface acquaintances would not understand what had happened to me. I saw the isolation that comes when your old priorities around status, superficial corporate success, and material accumulation fall away. Yet alongside those difficulties, I was shown a profound and purposeful road. I saw myself standing in rooms full of people, speaking openly about the reality of consciousness and the afterlife. I saw myself writing, advising executives and teams to lead with genuine empathy rather than ego, and comforting those who were grieving the loss of loved ones by assuring them that death is not the end. I saw that my experience was not meant for me alone, but was a trust given to me to share with anyone searching for meaning, healing, and hope. Looking at the immense love around me, part of my spirit wanted to stay forever in that perfect peace. But looking at the earth and remembering the suffering, confusion, and loneliness that so many people carry, my heart filled with a deep sense of responsibility. I turned to the source consciousness and answered, yes, I will go back. The moment that choice was made, I felt my awareness being gently gathered into a sphere of brilliant white light. The vast cosmic vistas and the golden presence began to soften, and I felt myself moving downward through the corridor of light, accelerating gently toward the physical realm. The split second my awareness re-entered my physical body on the operating table, my physical eyes snapped open, and my heart resumed its rhythm with a sharp, powerful thud. The medical team gasped in shock. Instruments clattered, monitors began beeping steadily again, and the surgeons and nurses scrambled to secure my lines. Clinically, I had been lost on that table. My heart had ceased beating, and by all medical standards, my journey should have ended right there. But I was back, breathing the cold air of the operating room, anchored once again in flesh and bone. The recovery process in the intensive care unit completely transformed how I perceived everyday reality. When I woke up, my physical body was weak, surrounded by the mechanical hum of monitors, intravenous stands, and medical equipment, yet inside my mind, everything was hyper-lucid. The veil between the physical world and the spiritual realm remained open. While resting in my hospital bed, I began to perceive the energy fields of everyone who walked into the room. I could see soft bands of light radiating around the doctors and nurses, shifting in color depending on whether they were tired, stressed, or genuinely compassionate. Even more startling, I could see presences that were not physical. I observed patients who had recently passed away in nearby rooms, lingering peacefully in fields of gentle light, as well as protective presences standing watch beside patients who were struggling through critical surgeries. At first, it was overwhelming. When I attempted to explain what I was seeing to the nursing staff, they smiled politely and treated it as temporary delirium caused by extreme blood loss and anesthesia. But my thoughts were completely ordered, sharp, and clear. A trusted friend who stayed by my side throughout my hospital stay listened to me without skepticism. She understood that something fundamental had shifted inside me. She helped me advocate for my recovery, bringing gentle herbal teas, clean whole foods, and nutrient-dense support that my body intuitively asked for, even while the attending physicians remained doubtful of anything outside standard pharmaceuticals. The surgical team had initially planned a series of aggressive secondary procedures and heavy ongoing treatments, warning me that my digestive tract was severely compromised. But deep within my own awareness, I held a complete visual memory of the inner architecture of my body. I knew that my tissues needed deep rest, clean hydration, mental calm, and natural alignment, rather than more trauma on the operating table. I made the conscious choice to refuse the invasive procedures and took full ownership of my healing. Within days, when I was able to sit up, stand, and walk steadily down the hallway on my own, the chief surgeon examined my follow-up imaging in pure astonishment. He openly admitted that he could not explain how rapidly my tissues had regenerated and stabilized. I need to put both feet on the floor here. The rapid recovery is part of the narrator's testimony. It is not medical advice, and it does not tell another patient what treatment to accept or refuse. I was not in that hospital, I have not seen the imaging, and I cannot explain the surgeon's reported reaction. What I can hear is how completely the experience changed the narrator's sense of ownership over the body. That conviction may be meaningful without becoming a prescription for anyone else. Stories like this deserve room, but so does caution. Holding those two things together is less satisfying than choosing a side. It is also more honest. Returning to daily life, however, brought a very different kind of challenge. When you experience the eternal nature of consciousness, your relationship to the ordinary world changes completely. The corporate milestones, status games, and surface conversations that used to fill my calendar suddenly felt hollow. Several longtime business acquaintances and friends who were accustomed to my former, purely ambitious self found my new perspective uncomfortable and quietly drifted away. That sudden distance was difficult at first, but it taught me the power of living with absolute authenticity. Instead of falling into resentment, I anchored my life in daily gratitude. Every morning I step outside into the fresh air, walk quietly, and observe the world. The sky, the trees, the wind, and the simple gift of breathing. I live each day with the clear awareness that our physical time here is temporary, fragile, and deeply purposeful. My work in strategy and media advisory transformed alongside my worldview. My perception had become multidimensional. Whenever I stepped into a room to consult with corporate teams, creative directors, or leaders facing complex disputes, I could instantly sense the unspoken dynamics beneath the surface. I could perceive emotional blocks, hidden intentions, and missing puzzle pieces before anyone even opened a presentation file. Whenever a project hit a dead end, I learned to close my eyes, step back from the mental noise, and allow intuitive resonance to guide the solution. Time and again, pointing directly to an overlooked detail or a neglected human relationship resolved structural problems that months of purely intellectual analysis had failed to fix. This shift in awareness guided every major life decision that followed. When I was weighing whether to relocate my creative consultancy among major international hubs, I stepped back from overthinking and asked for clear synchronicity. While paused at a busy traffic intersection, an unexpected transport truck crossed right before me, bearing the name of the destination city illuminated boldly across its side. I trusted the intuitive signal immediately, packed my belongings, and relocated without hesitation. A city name on the side of a truck is weak evidence for a life decision. I think the narrator before the hospital would have said exactly that. Afterward, the same sight becomes enough to pack a home and move. That reversal may be the most practical proof of transformation in the whole account. Beliefs can change in conversation. A relocation leaves boxes on the floor. I am not sure whether the truck was a sign, a coincidence, or a mind newly willing to recognize permission. Perhaps the important fact is simpler. The narrator no longer required certainty before acting. What once looked like risk now felt like alignment, and an ordinary intersection became the place where a new life received its address. Making that leap opened doors I could never have planned through ordinary calculation. It brought aligned partners, gave me the freedom to mentor high-performance teams with an emphasis on empathy, and allowed me to begin writing and speaking openly about consciousness and near-death experiences. When people look at the state of our modern world today, many feel overwhelmed by technological acceleration, political division, and economic anxiety. Many wonder if humanity is heading toward collapse. But what I was shown during my experience is that underneath the outward noise, a quiet, monumental shift toward cosmic maturity is unfolding. The rigid categories that divide human beings, nationalities, social rankings, wealth, and dogma, do not exist beyond this physical dimension. On the other side, there is only the essence of who you are and the love you have shared. Our essential purpose on earth is remarkably simple: to show up every single day with kindness, to act with integrity, and to ease the journey for those around us. My background as an atheist had once led me to believe that science and spirituality were fundamentally opposed, but experiencing the underlying mathematics and living geometry of the cosmos showed me they are simply two languages describing the same reality. Principles like quantum entanglement, non-locality, and harmonic resonance are the tangible mechanical expressions of an interconnected universe held together by conscious awareness. We are not isolated fragments competing against one another on a random rock in space. We are individual expressions of a single, continuous, and intelligent field of life. Because of this, I carry no fear of physical death. Death is not an end, a punishment, or a leap into nothingness. It is simply taking off a heavy coat after a long journey and stepping back into the warmth of home. That realization does not make this physical life less valuable. Rather, it makes every single hour here infinitely precious, because physical existence is our rare opportunity to practice unconditional love, patience, and compassion amid limitation. Remember that you are loved beyond measure. You are part of something greater than yourself. Don't be afraid to live authentically and to follow your heart. Be kind to yourself and others, and never underestimate the power of a single act of love or kindness. It can change the world in ways you might never see. I leave this account more comforted by the stairwell than by the cosmos. The living tree, the equations, and the golden presence are immense, but the image that settles me is a tired woman feeling visible because someone lifted her bags without asking to be remembered. Beside it sits the harder image, a sister offering love in a school hallway and receiving silence. The account does not let either moment stay small. That may be its most demanding claim, that a life is continually shaped in places where nobody thinks a verdict is being written. I do not know whether every life review works that way, or whether this person's mind found the one language impossible to dismiss. If you have crossed a boundary like this, or returned with a very different measure of what matters, please tell me, did your answer arrive as something vast, or as something as ordinary as a gum wrapper in a river and a stranger's heavy bags on the stairs?